I don't think there was any tension in my body or my mind. There was no actual earth, of course, only a wooden floor. But when I started planting, me as Willy Loman, carrots, quarter-inch apart, suddenly I was in a backyard, not an auditorium, planting seeds. I knew I wasn't crazy. I heard everything that I was saying and what the other actors were saying. I knew I was acting in a play, but I also knew that I wasn't acting. Corinne had gone to the University of Iowa during my high school years. It was reputed to have one of the 5 best theater departments in the country. I drove from Milwaukee to visit Corinne in Iowa City several times. We'd go to a football game together, and then I'd see her in one of the university productions. When I was 17, I saw her play the part of Gwendolyn in The Importance of Being Earnest. After the show, I met her stage director, whom I liked very much. He looked at me for a second, and then he said, "When are we going to get this fella?" Corinne was invited to a party that someone was giving after the show. She told the host that she would like to bring her kid brother along. We walked into an old Victorian house stuffed with college students. There were all kinds of things to eat and drink. Corinne introduced me to her roommate, Mary Jo, who had the most original lips I'd ever seen, except perhaps for those of the French actress Jeanne Moreau, whom I'd seen in a movie called The Lovers. She and Jeanne Moreau must have traded lip secrets. I wish that Mary Jo was going to my high school so that I could date her. But since she was a college student, and I was what my father would have called a high school pisher, I honestly didn't think she would give me the time of day after we were introduced. I wasn't particularly handsome, and I certainly wasn't very experienced, especially when it came to the opposite sex. But to my surprise, Mary Jo stayed with me during the whole party. We sat down on a small sofa and ate hors d'oeuvres and watched everyone else in the room either kissing or drinking beer, or both. I don't know if I kissed Mary Jo first or if she kissed me. Maybe it was both at the same time. But we started kissing, and we kept on kissing. I don't remember anything we said to each other. I just remember the kissing and the look in her eyes where a small beam of light was reflected from the street lamp. When the party broke up, we said goodbye. I slept in my used car that night and drove back to Milwaukee the next morning. The memory of Mary Jo's eyes stayed in my dreams for a long time. As a high school graduation present, my mother and father let me go to New York to see plays, provided I stayed at an inexpensive hotel. The old Taft Hotel on 50th and 6th Avenue fit the bill. I saw Gentlemen Prefer Blondes starring Carol Channing. During her performance, I was particularly curious how she could keep using her throat to make the guttural sounds she used in her talking and singing without going hoarse. After the show, I stood at the stage door with a few other people waiting for her to come out. When she did, she signed some autographs and then came up to me, expecting me to give her a program to sign. I don't know where I got the nerve to say it. "Miss Channing, does it hurt your throat when you talk and sing in that special way that you do?" She looked at me as if I were some kind of country bumpkin and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She gave me an autograph, I thanked her, and she left. One evening, instead of seeing a play, I went to the Paris movie theater and saw Charlie Chaplin in City Lights. More than any other movie I've ever seen, City Lights made the biggest impression on me as an actor. It was funny, then sad, then both at the same time. That fall, I went straight off to the University of Iowa, acting in the first production of the year, The Winslow Boy, directed by Corinne's director, whom I liked so much, and who had said, "When are we going to get this fella?" Chapter 4, The Demon Arrives. I suppose that everyone has had to wrestle with a demon at some time in their life. My demon came out of hiding on the first day of spring during my freshman year. It came out without warning, like a sudden eclipse of the sun. Not in the disguise of alcohol abuse or drugs or gambling or sexual perversion, nothing like that. My demon came out in the form of a horrible compulsion to pray. I say horrible because I didn't want to pray. I had to pray. Wherever I was, even though I didn't know what I was supposed to be praying for. When the compulsion came upon me, I would pray in front of whichever building I was about to enter for my next class. I would speak to God out loud, but I tried to move my lips as little as possible when people passed by, because I was afraid they'd think I was another one of those poor souls who hadn't bathed or changed clothes for a week, who usually smelled of urine as they mumbled up and down busy streets, talking to God or the devil, oblivious of everyone around them. I was excruciatingly aware of everyone around me, but I thought that if I were truly humble, then the presence of all these passers-by shouldn't bother me. I kept on mumbling softly, trying to find out, as I prayed, what terrible thing I could possibly have done for which I needed God's forgiveness. The craziness reached a point where, one morning, I plastered down my curly hair with Vaseline just to prove how truly humble I was. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a freak. I was so embarrassed, I didn't know how I could leave the house and go to class, but I did. I walked into my theater history class and sat next to my lunch pal, Betty Canzel. She used to make fun of me if I missed breakfast and she heard my stomach gurgling. But on this morning, she just kept staring at me. "What the hell did you do to your hair?" "I'm just trying something. I'll tell you later." "It looks horrible. Why did you do that?" "I told you, I'm just trying something. I'll tell you later." And then one day, just like that, as if a motor or an electric switch had been turned off, the compulsion stopped. The demon was gone. I felt as if I had just finished running in a long race, exhausted but exhilarated, and could now be a normal person again. But 3 or 4 days later, the demon returned. The pattern repeated itself so often that I felt as Dr. Jekyll must have felt when he could no longer control the comings and goings of Mr. Hyde. I never knew how long each episode would last. 3 days? A week? 2 weeks? I never knew what set off the compulsion. The only small clue I had was wondering every once in a while why I should have the right to possess money, if I should ever acquire any, when there were people all over the world who were dying of starvation. Being on stage was a thing that saved me from myself. When I was in a play, I was safe. I did 4 plays in a row that first year, and then, for the 5th production, I was cast as Willy Loman's son, Biff, in Death of a Salesman, the play that had changed my life when I was 16 years old. On opening night, the auditorium was packed. We'd rehearsed for 4 weeks, and now I was lying in my upstairs bedroom, on stage, waiting for the cue for my first entrance. I didn't want to pray. Not tonight, dear God, please. Maybe the demon forced his way in because it was this particular play. As I waited for my cue, I kept thinking that I could shut him out in plenty of time, but I couldn't. The fear of not praying overpowered me, even though it was a matter of seconds before my entrance. I saw both the play and my brain falling apart. Then, somehow, the obligation to the audience and Arthur Miller and my memory of Lee J. Cobb and Mildred Gunnick became more important to me than God. I heard my cue, said my first line, and I was safe for the remainder of the play. Years after that, I still carried the inexplicable conviction that once I stepped onto the stage, they couldn't get me, whoever the hell they were, and that I was safe, so long as the curtain was up. I drove home for the Easter break. My mother was so happy to see me that I thought she'd burst. She was thrilled that I was going to be home for 10 whole days. She laughed so much at my silly jokes that she peed in her pants again. "Now look what you made me do, Jerry." After dinner, I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch and weeping quietly. I sat beside her. "What, Mom? What's the matter?" She said, "In 9 more days, you'll be gone." A little later, at about 7 o'clock, I said I was going to take a short walk around the neighborhood. It was still light outside, and I wanted to get some fresh air. After walking several blocks, with the demon pounding at my consciousness, trying to get in, I found myself in an open field on the outskirts of town. A field I used to play in only a few years before. The demon knew where he was leading me. I knelt down on the hard earth and started praying. We were never a particularly religious family when I was growing up, in the sense of prayers at home or rituals, other than going to my grandparents for a meal on Passover and going to the synagogue on the high holidays.